My stepson refused my support, just because I'm not his father. Hello, my name is Michael and this is my sad story. I am 46, living in Chicago, and have been married to Emily for 14 years. That sentence looks simple on paper the way a bridge looks simple from far away. Up close you see the bolts, the strain, the rust that never sleeps. You see the river underneath waiting for anything that slips. When I married her, I didn't just inherit vows. I inherited orbit. A small boy with his mother's eyes and another man's last name. Joshua was 5 then, all elbows and questions, already fluent in the language of absence. He talked about dinosaurs and the moon and a father who lived in California like California was heaven and airports were gates to grace. I learned quickly that you can't compete with a myth. You can only try to live beside it without letting it hollow you out. That name moved through our house like a draft you could never quite find to seal. He mailed postcards with palm trees and copper sunsets, handwriting loud and careless, the voice of someone who never sat through a fever breaking at 3 a.m. He posted photos from parties and rooftops and boats, always a drink lifted toward the camera, always a crowd. He looked like a man who would never die. He looked like a man who had never stayed. I stayed. I stayed for the meetings with teachers who said, Joshua has potential, and meant he needs someone to keep showing up. I stayed for the urinal cakes and the disinfectant smell of boys' bathrooms at elementary schools, for winter coats a size too big because he would grow, for the hours in traffic on the Eisenhower because practice ran late and he needed a ride and the other parents had plans. I stayed for the hammer and nails when a school project was due tomorrow, for the burnt pancakes and the apology breakfast that followed, for the way he would curl into me on the couch when the thunder got too close. I stayed when staying earned me nothing but another day. He started calling me Dad, at 9. It slipped out like a truth that had been waiting in the dark for the courage to speak. He said it over toast, crumbs scattered like confetti for a parade no one else attended. I didn't correct him. I took the word the way a starving man takes a crust. Reverently, privately, afraid someone would decide I hadn't earned it and pull it from my mouth. Emily watched us with a tired smile that wasn't joy exactly. It was relief. A rope finally catching on a hook. Bodies remember work. So does love. The waiting rooms remember too, the plastic chairs aligned like soldiers, the mint gum under every seat, the echoes of televisions with no sound. Flu season. Sprained wrists. X-rays that came back fine. I signed my name under his always the wrong last name, always the right responsibility. When the nurse asked, Father? I said yes. It wasn't a lie. Not in the way that mattered. Chicago gave us seasons like verdicts. Lake wind that cut through bones in January, a spring so wet even hope felt soggy, August heat that made tempers short and streets smell like metal. Through all of it our routine held. He grew taller than the door frames I measured him against. I learned the price of new shoes bought twice in a year because boys are earthquakes disguised as children. I learned patience as a manual **Elo. I learned to let the word, Dad, land each time like the first time and not ask it to promise me anything. Aaron sent a skateboard once. It was expensive, the kind of gift that announces itself like a siren. He wrote, Ride hard, champ. No return address. Joshua held it like a holy thing, rolled it back and forth across our kitchen tile, scraped a line into the grout. He showed it to me without looking at me as if pride required him to face another room. I took him to the park that afternoon because that is what fathers do with gifts other fathers mail. He fell twice. He bled. I ran the water over his palms and watched red curl away down the drain like a secret. He didn't cry. I didn't either. We stood at the sink together, 2 stubborn men, one big and one small with the same job. Keep going. There were good years. Quiet years. Photos on the fridge. Missing teeth, bent trophies, a crooked science fair ribbon where the glue shows. Emily in the middle, her arm around each of us, the 3 of us pretending a triangle is as strong as a circle if you hold it right. We had Sundays like soft rooms. Basketball on TV. Homework spread like a map we were learning to read. Thanks, Dad, he'd say when I fixed the printer or found the lost cleat. The syllables were clumsy in his mouth, but they were there. I let them bind me. I let them turn into a promise I never said but always kept. People like to tell you that love is a feeling. They don't say that most days it's a ledger. Time and money out. Miles driven, arguments swallowed, apologies offered when you weren't the one in the wrong because someone has to go first or the house burns down from the inside. I paid the light bill and the orthodontist and the registration fees. I paid attention. That one costs more than all the rest. Early cracks hide in ordinary moments. A joke that doesn't land. A birthday call that never comes. The way Emily's voice went flat when the mail brought Aaron's postcard in July with a picture of fireworks over a beach we couldn't afford to visit. She put it on the fridge anyway because hope is a habit you don't notice until it's bankrupt. Joshua traced the outline of the fireworks with his finger. "Ellie," he whispered like you would say home, if the word didn't fit in your mouth yet. He asked about the ocean. I told him it was loud and alive and that it never stops. He nodded like he understood and went back to his cereal. Later I found the postcard under his pillow. I didn't move it. I have learned not to evict a child's private tenants. By 12, he moved through rooms with the beginnings of secrecy humming around him. By 13, the humming had rhythm. New friends. New language. New silences. I told myself it was normal because normal is a story adults tell themselves when they're afraid of better words like shift and drift. We argued about chores. We negotiated curfews like diplomats too tired to go to war. He rolled his eyes the way teenagers do when the person who buys their food says no. He said, whatever, the way a knife says, only a little blood. Still I made space. I kept my voice calm. I let him be intelligent in the loud, sloppy way boys are when they've survived childhood and believe adolescence is a crown rather than a bridge. He slammed his door. I fixed the hinge. He missed *T and threw the ball. I threw it back and told him to try again. Our lives were a loop stitched by repetition. That's what family is when it doesn't have genius, persistence. Emily worked double shifts in those days. The pandemic years rewired the city in her. I cooked more. I burned less. We three became a machine built from necessity. We ate together when we could. We didn't when we couldn't. We texted from rooms away like everyone else, tiny white bubbles carrying grocery lists and love disguised as logistics. Pick up milk meant we still function. On my way meant don't give up. The first time he asked about Aaron directly, not as myth, not as postcard, he was 14. We were in the car, windshield wipers beating the same sentence over and over. Do you think he'll come back? He asked, voice casual, eyes forward, the way men talk about things that can break them. I said I didn't know. It was the truth. It was also a lie. Men like Aaron don't come back. They orbit closer until your tide rises and then drift again. Do you hate him? Joshua asked. I don't know him, I said. That made him smile just a little. You know me, he said. I do, I answered, and the car felt warmer. He slept in the passenger seat that night on the way home from practice. Head tilted against the window, mouth open a little, breath clouding the glass. I looked at him at a red light and felt something flare that wasn't pride, wasn't joy, wasn't any word you can wear in public without crying. It was the knowledge that if a bus came for him, I would step in front of it gladly and never complain about the wheels. This is the part where I'm supposed to tell you we became unbreakable. We didn't. We became ordinary in the way that makes breakage inevitable. Ordinary is where hairline fractures hide best. In the jokes. In the sighs. In the way Emily touched my shoulder less because we were tired, not because we were cruel. On his 15th birthday, Aaron called. The number flashed with a West Coast area code, and the air in the kitchen went thin. He spoke to Joshua for 8 minutes and 26 seconds. I know because I counted by the sound of my own pulse. After Joshua was quiet. He didn't say what they'd talked about. He didn't have to. The house smelled like ocean for days. None of us could name it. We all still breathed it. I'm telling you all this so you see it the way I did. Not as one moment but as sediment. A riverbed of small things building a shape you only recognize when the water runs low. The laughter in the photos. The spaces between the frames. The years where Dad was a bridge and I believed bridges never fall if you keep painting them. 14 years is a long time to believe anything. It is also the perfect length of a fuse. It began like weather, slow, silent, unremarkable until the day the sky fell apart. By the time Joshua turned 17, something in him had shifted. He was taller than me now, broader at the shoulders, but thinner in ways that weren't physical. His eyes carried distance, like he was always looking at a horizon no one else could see. He started speaking less, answering in half sentences, walking through rooms like a visitor in a house he'd already left behind. Then Aaron reappeared. It was February, a gray Chicago afternoon when everything looked washed in concrete. Emily called me at work. Her voice trembled, the kind of tremor that pretends to be casual. He reached out, she said. I didn't need to ask who. Aaron had flown in for business. He wanted to see his son, just a coffee, just to talk. Emily thought it would be good for Joshua. Closure, she said. I almost laughed. Closure is a word therapists use for people who still believe wounds can be zipped shut. That weekend Joshua met him downtown. He came home glowing. His cheeks flushed with something between joy and relief. He said Aaron talked about the colleges on the East Coast, Yale, Columbia, places we never mentioned because the tuition looked like ransom. He said Aaron knew people, that he had connections. He wants to help me, Joshua said. I nodded, poured coffee I didn't drink, and told him that was good. But inside I felt the architecture creak. 14 years of cement, cracking under one man's return. After that, Aaron became a presence again, not in flesh but in echo. Joshua quoted him the way preachers quote scripture. Dad says networking is everything. Dad says you can't play it safe. Dad says he might know someone at Columbia admissions. Every dad says felt like a slow subtraction of my worth. I stopped correcting the word. It belonged to him by blood. I had only borrowed it, apparently on a lease that had expired. Emily said, "Don't take it personally. He's just excited." But excitement has a scent. It smells like betrayal before it looks like it. At dinner, Joshua would sit scrolling on his phone while I talked about scholarship applications. Aaron says he can help with that, he'd interrupt, his tone sharp with certainty. I'd nod, chew, swallow anger with my food. Emily stayed silent, her fork tapping the plate like punctuation for the things she didn't say. The postcard stopped years ago, but his ghost had found Wi-Fi. He sent texts now, photos of sunsets with captions like, "Wish you were here, champ." He sent pictures of a yacht on Lake Michigan, all white and glass, with girls half his age holding champagne. Joshua showed them to me once, smiling. He's doing great. I said nothing. Because envy and pity look the same when they hide behind restraint. Spring came. College decisions started arriving. Joshua got into Northwestern, DePaul, a few out-of-state schools. I congratulated him. We sat down one evening, all three of us, to talk about tuition and housing. I'd been saving since he was 12. Quietly. Systematically. My bank account bore the proof of every overtime shift, every weekend I'd worked instead of rested. I explained the numbers. Tuition covered. Housing deposit ready. A plan built on practicality, not fantasy. Joshua barely looked up from his phone. Aaron says he might get me something better, he muttered. Emily frowned. Better? Yeah, Joshua said. He knows people at Columbia. Said he could help me apply again if we cover the fees. Joshua, I said softly, we already sent the decisions. Northwestern is a great school. You'll save. He cut me off. You don't have to worry about it. He said he'd handle it. He said it with the ease of someone who's never had to calculate the cost of anything. That was the first time I felt invisible in my own house. Not ignored, erased. The next evening we sat at dinner again. The conversation turned to money as it always did. I mentioned budgeting, the need to be careful. We can't just. Joshua snorted. You don't get to decide that. I looked up. Excuse me? He shrugged. I mean, you're not my real dad. You don't get to control my future. The air went still. I could hear the refrigerator hum, the clock tick, the faint scrape of Emily's fork freezing against the plate. It's strange how betrayal doesn't shout. It whispers. It lands like snow, soft, suffocating, inevitable. I didn't speak for a long time. Emily opened her mouth, closed it again. Joshua stared straight ahead, proud of the sentence he'd just built from his father's blueprints. When I finally spoke, my voice sounded like someone else's. You're right, I said. I'm not your father. He blinked, unsure whether it was victory or warning. That night I didn't sleep. I lay beside Emily, her back turned, the light from her phone flickering against the wall. I thought about every lunch I packed, every winter coat I bought, every time I said no to myself so I could say yes to him. And I thought about that one sentence, "You're not my real dad," undoing it all like a string pulled from a sweater. Morning came gray and cruel. I made coffee, black, bitter, exact. When Joshua came downstairs, I didn't look at him. I canceled the deposit, I said. He froze. What? The tuition deposit. The housing reservation. They're off. You can't. I can, I said quietly. You said I'm not your father. That means your father can handle your college expenses. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Emily appeared in the doorway, her robe half-tied, eyes wide. Michael, what are you doing? I'm respecting boundaries, I said. Joshua's voice cracked into fury. This is messed up. You're ruining everything. I shrugged. Maybe Aaron can fix it. He seems to fix everything with stories. He stormed upstairs. Emily didn't follow. She just looked at me with the expression of someone realizing the gravity of her own silence. Days passed. The house grew quieter. My phone stopped buzzing with banking alerts. The weight of obligation began to lift, molecule by molecule. 2 weeks later, Joshua came home pale, eyes rimmed with panic. He said he can't help, he whispered. I didn't answer. He said he's broke. The words hung between us like ghosts who'd overstayed their welcome. Reality arrived the way truth always does, slow, merciless, undeniable. The man who promised the world couldn't afford a semester of it. Joshua sat at the kitchen table, silent. His phone lay face down. The yacht photos disappeared from his social media that night. The next morning he asked to talk. He didn't look proud anymore. I was wrong, he said. I nodded. We both were. I told him I'd still support his education, but not his entitlement. Tuition and housing, yes. The rest, books, food, gas, life, was his to carry. He agreed quietly, almost gratefully. Emily said nothing, but her eyes softened, maybe for me, maybe for herself. Later that week, Joshua found a job at the university bookstore. Minimum wage, long hours, nothing glamorous. But when he brought home his first paycheck, I saw a different kind of pride flicker across his face. Earned pride. Heavy, honest, real. Sometimes, lessons don't need to be taught. They just need to be allowed to hurt long enough to be remembered. That night, I sat alone in the kitchen, the house dim, the clock steady. Outside, the streetlights buzzed. Inside, I whispered his words again, "You're not my real dad." They didn't cut anymore. They just sounded like proof that I had finally stopped pretending. Because love, when it's one-sided, isn't love at all. It's charity with a heartbeat. And mine had finally learned how to beat for itself again. By the time summer settled over the city, the house had changed shape. Not physically, its bones were the same, but the air inside felt thinner, like something essential had been burned away and no one wanted to open a window. Joshua spoke to me carefully now, his words measured, his tone polite in the way you speak to a stranger who holds your future in his hands. Emily existed between us like a cautious diplomat. Every conversation felt translated. He worked at the university bookstore 5 days a week, sometimes 6. He came home tired but steady, the kind of exhaustion that carries its own quiet pride. Once, I saw him sitting on the porch after work, counting the cash tips he'd earned for helping students carry boxes. The same boy who once said I had no right to make decisions for him was learning what it meant to decide for himself. I wanted to feel satisfaction. Instead, I felt age. Nights were long. I would sit in the living room with a glass of bourbon, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of floorboards. Silence can be addictive once you've lived through years of shouting without sound. I'd scroll through old photos on my phone. Birthdays, graduations, the trip to Wisconsin Dells when Joshua was 10. In every picture, I looked like a man convinced he was part of something permanent. One evening, Emily came into the room carrying a stack of bills. "He's short on rent," she said. "He has a job," I replied. "It's not enough." "That's the point." She sighed. "Michael, he's trying." "So did I said, and the words tasted bitter on my tongue. She sat across from me, folding the bills into neat stacks. "You're not still angry, are you?" I looked at her. "Do you think anger lasts this long? What's left now isn't anger, it's arithmetic." Emily didn't respond. She gathered the papers, her movements small, careful, as if noise might wake the ghosts still sleeping between us. Weeks passed. Joshua adjusted to his new life of part-time shifts and ration meals. He stopped asking for extras. He learned to stretch, to wait, to earn. Sometimes he'd bring home leftover sandwiches from the shop. He'd offer one to me without words. I always accepted, though I never ate it. It wasn't about food, it was truce. In August, he called from campus, voice trembling. "There's been an accident," he said. My heart dropped before I asked details. He'd been in a car with a friend. Rain, bad brakes, a guardrail. Minor injuries. Bruised ribs. Shaken but alive. When the police contacted me later, they listed me as his emergency contact. My name, mine not Aaron's, was the one in their report. The irony stung and soothed in equal measure. The boy who once said I was not his father had become, in the eyes of the law, mine again. Emily drove us to the hospital. The night smelled of rain and exhaust. Inside, fluorescent lights washed everything in sterile clarity. Joshua sat on a gurney, a scrape across his cheek, his wrist wrapped in gauze. When he saw me, his eyes filled in a way they hadn't in years. "I didn't know who else they'd call," he said. "They called the right person," I answered. He nodded, looking down. "I'm sorry." "For the accident? For the years?" I didn't ask. Some apologies shouldn't be interrogated. On the drive home, Emily kept her eyes on the road, her hands steady at 10 and 2. "He could have died," she whispered. "But he didn't," I said. "He learned something more valuable." "What's that?" "That consequences don't ask permission. She didn't answer, and for once the silence didn't feel like distance. It felt like truth. After that, something between Joshua and me shifted again, slowly, quietly, without ceremony. He called sometimes, not to ask for money but for advice. How to fix a leaky faucet, how to handle a late payment, how to apologize without losing pride. The questions were small, but in them I heard the echo of the boy who once needed me for everything. One night, he texted, "Thanks for sticking around even when I didn't deserve it." I stared at the screen for a long time before replying, "You learned faster than I did." That fall he came home for Thanksgiving. He looked older, sharper, the kind of young man forged by his own mistakes. He helped Emily cook, set the table, even offered to wash the dishes. After dinner he handed me an envelope. Inside was a receipt for a small payment, his student loan balance. "It's not much," he said, "but I'm paying it off myself now." I wanted to say something profound, something cinematic. All I managed was a nod. Later that night I found myself standing outside his old bedroom door. The posters were gone, the bed neatly made, the air smelling faintly of dust and detergent. I thought about all the nights I'd stood there before, angry, helpless, waiting for him to come out and face me. Now I stood there quietly, grateful he still had a door to walk through. A week later a letter arrived. From Aaron. The envelope was thin, the handwriting sloppy like always. I almost threw it away, but curiosity is a stubborn disease. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The letter said little: "Glad to see he's doing well. You did good, man. Thanks for keeping him alive. Maybe we'll grab a drink sometime." The photo showed Aaron on that same yacht, older now, the sun bouncing off water that looked too expensive for honesty. I tore it in half and dropped it in the trash. That night Joshua called. He texted me, he said. I didn't reply. "Good," I said. "He doesn't get it, does he?" "No," I replied. "But maybe that's the point. Some people never learn the cost of what they waste." Silence followed, the kind that hums with understanding. In December his first semester ended. He sent photos from campus, the bookstore decorated with lights, his coworkers smiling beside him, a caption that read, "Made it through." Underneath he wrote, "Love you, Dad." I stared at those words until they blurred. 14 years of noise distilled into 3 syllables and a truth I had almost stopped believing in. Emily read the message over my shoulder. "He means it," she said softly. "Maybe," I answered. "Or maybe he's finally learning that words only matter when they cost something." She smiled faintly. "You always have to find a lesson, don't you?" "That's what fathers do," I said. She looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time in years her eyes didn't hold pity or doubt. Just recognition. Weeks later, a winter storm rolled through the city. Power lines down, streets frozen. Joshua called from campus, worried about us. He offered to drive home to help shovel, bring supplies, do anything. I told him to stay put. He argued, said he owed me. I laughed. "You owe me nothing," I said. "You paid your debt the day you decided to grow up." The call ended with a simple "Love you, Dad," and this time it didn't sound borrowed. It sounded like home. That night, as the snow fell outside, I poured one last drink and sat by the window, watching the city blur under white. Somewhere out there, a younger version of me was still fighting for respect that couldn't be earned. I wanted to tell him it was never about winning. It was about letting go before bitterness turned you into the ghost you'd replaced. Joshua's light had finally found its own source. And for the first time in years, I could rest without wondering if I'd done enough. Because maybe fatherhood isn't about being chosen. Maybe it's about staying long enough for them to realize they never had to. Winter lingered longer than usual that year. Chicago has a way of stretching cold until it feels personal, until even the air seems to remind you of what you've lost. By January, the snow outside had hardened into a crust of ice, and the world looked trapped beneath it. But inside the house, something had thawed. Joshua called often now. Not every day, but enough that the silence between calls no longer felt like abandonment. He talked about work, about classes, about a professor who saw potential in his essays. He talked about late nights at the bookstore and how sometimes, when the closing lights flickered off, he would think of me waiting in old parking lots when he was a boy, headlights cutting through snow, engine running, patient. "I didn't get it back then," he said once. "I do now." I didn't tell him that understanding has its own cost, that it arrives only after the damage is done. Some lessons deserve their scars. Emily and I moved through the house like people relearning a language. We cooked together more often. The quiet wasn't avoidance anymore, it was peace. I'd find her in the kitchen humming softly, sleeves rolled up, eyes soft when she caught me watching. "He's changing," she'd say, half smiling. Maybe we all are. Change doesn't come from love, I told her once. It comes from loss. She didn't disagree. In February, Joshua came home for the weekend. He looked older, more deliberate in his movements. His voice carried weight now, not arrogance but certainty. He helped me clear the driveway, laughing when the shovel caught on the ice. When we finished, he leaned on the handle, breath clouding in the cold. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "What?" "Everything. Staying. Teaching me the hard way." I thought about that for a long moment. The question deserved more than an easy answer. "Regret?" I said finally. "No. Regret belongs to people who expect gratitude. I expected nothing. I just refused to keep being invisible." He nodded, the kind of nod that means understanding without agreement. "I used to think you were cold," he said quietly. "Now I get that you were just tired of burning." We went inside. Emily had made soup, simple, good enough. The three of us ate together, laughter cautious but real. When Joshua left that night to drive back to campus, he hugged me longer than he ever had. "Take care, Dad," he said. Those words used to feel like something I had to earn. Now they felt like something he wanted to give. After he left, Emily found me at the table, staring at the door. "You did it," she said. "No," I replied. "He did." But later, when the house was dark, I allowed myself to believe that maybe endurance counts as doing. The months that followed were quiet. Joshua kept his part-time job and picked up an internship that summer. He sent photos, smiling behind a counter, standing in front of stacks of books, sunlight cutting through the windows like approval. In every picture his posture was different, upright, grounded. I printed one and pinned it to the fridge. Aaron, predictably, didn't stay silent for long. He sent a message to Emily first, a long, self-pitying monologue about wanting to be part of Joshua's success. Then one to me: "He's doing great. We should both be proud." Pride. The word tasted like dust. I didn't respond. I had spent too many years feeding the myth of his relevance. Now his words fell into the same void he'd left years ago. One night in late April, Joshua called from campus, his voice different, calmer, heavier. "He texted me again," he said. "What did you do?" I blocked him. "Why?" He paused. "Because I finally know who showed up." For a while neither of us spoke. Then he said, I used to think blood meant everything. But I've started to realize something. Blood just makes you related. Effort makes you family." I closed my eyes and let the words settle. "Took you long enough," I said quietly, though I smiled. He laughed. "Guess I learned from the stubborn one." After we hung up, I sat in the dim light of the kitchen, staring at the photo on the fridge. The young man in that picture no longer looked like the boy who once said I wasn't his real dad. He looked like a man who understood the cost of his own growth. Summer came. The days grew long, humid, forgiving. Joshua spent most of it in the city, working, saving, visiting on weekends when he could. Each time he brought something: groceries, tools, sometimes just time. Once he surprised me with a pair of gloves. "For the driveway," he said. "So you don't freeze next winter." The gesture was small but heavy with meaning. It wasn't about gloves. It was about acknowledgement. About a boy finally seeing the man who had been standing there all along. In September, we visited his campus for Parents' Weekend. The sky was clean and blue, the kind of day that makes you forget Chicago ever had winter. Students laughed on the lawns, music played from somewhere unseen. When Joshua saw us, he waved, running across the courtyard with the same unguarded smile he used to have when he was 9. He introduced me to his friends. "This is my dad," he said, without hesitation, without emphasis. Just truth. The words landed differently this time, not as a reward, not as repair, but as a fact that no one could take apart. Emily squeezed my hand. For a second, the years folded in on themselves and I saw every version of us. The stranger who once walked into their lives, the woman who tried to hold the pieces together, the boy who had to break something to learn its value. That night, driving home, the city lights blurred through the windshield. Emily rested her head on my shoulder. "Do you ever think about how close we came to losing him?" she whispered. "All the time," I said. "And us." I looked at her reflection in the window. We were lost for a while. But maybe sometimes you have to let things fall apart before they make sense. She smiled faintly. "You always sound like you're writing a sermon." "Maybe," I said. "But this one's for me." The following winter, Joshua graduated early. When he walked across that stage, I watched from the audience, hands clasped, heart steady. Emily cried. I didn't. My tears had already been spent in quieter rooms. After the ceremony, he handed me his cap. Inside the rim, he'd written in small letters, "Thank you for staying." I didn't say anything. I just pulled him into a hug, the kind that says everything words can't afford. That night, I sat on the porch alone, the city breathing beyond the frozen yards. 14 years. 14 winters. 14 chances to quit that I didn't take. I thought of Aaron again, not with anger, not even with contempt, just a dull understanding. He'd never know this kind of victory, the one built from endurance instead of applause. Maybe that's what being a father truly means, not biology, not titles, not gratitude. Just the choice to keep standing when no one claps. So here I am, 46, older, quieter, no longer waiting for recognition. I have learned that love without respect is rot, and respect without love is stone. Somewhere between them there's balance, the kind that only arrives after everything breaks. Joshua visits now on Sundays. We talk about work, about life, about nothing at all. He leaves before dark, always with a hug and the same words, "Love you, Dad." And every time he says it, I ask myself the same question I've been asking since the night he tried to erase me. Was I wrong to walk away before he learned what loss meant? Or was that the only way to teach him what love truly cost? I don't have the answer. Maybe no father ever does. But I stayed long enough to ask it, and sometimes that's enough to call it redemption.